Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It's Taylor Twellman from Major League Soccer and Apple TV. What a wild ride it was last week with the conference semifinals in the Audi MLS Cup Playoffs. The Hudson River Derby again proved to be a one-sided affair as the New York Rebels shut out their rivals New York City for the fifth straight time in a knockout round competition, the first time in the playoffs. The LA Galaxy ran rampant over Minnesota United, scoring 6 goals, bringing their total to 15 in the playoffs, and they've only played 3 games. Orlando City used their sellout crowd to their advantage, putting a stop to the Cinderella story of Atlanta United as they now go to the first conference final in their history. And then the big one. 2019 was relived as the Sounders exercised their demons, beating LAFC on the road in the playoffs just like they did 5 years ago, which is where I want to start. Twellman's takes. So let's go. LAFC dominated the Seattle Sounders in 2024, but even more so since the moment they came into the league. The Sounders have won only 5 times in 22 games coming into Saturday night. But one of those wins was the epic game in 2019, where arguably the greatest team in MLS history, led by Bob Bradley and Carlos Vela, couldn't figure out Lodeiro and Ruidíaz on the night. And that win would propel the Sounders to their second MLS Cup. But Saturday night, it had to be different. One, Seattle hadn't beaten LAFC since 2021, and this version of the team is less talented than any of those. So how could they win? And 2, that Ruidíaz and Lodeiro that I speak of, they weren't walking through that door. So how would they even score goals against this team? Well, they needed help, and they got it. An own goal from Maxime Chanot that will stay with him forever. And then the big one, Jordan Morris. Finally, over 1,000 minutes against LAFC without a goal, he comes up big with a great finish and a game winner to send Seattle to the conference final. But this is more about LAFC. I'd argue this is a worse loss than 19 because there were no real threats from Seattle to score goals. I get it, the best defensive team in the league, but they didn't scare you in the attack. And yet LAFC were slow, anemic, methodical, lethargic, whatever buzzword you want to look for in their approach. I can understand the argument that they had players coming back from the international break, but they're also a deeper team than Seattle, and that didn't work in their favor. Olivier Giroud was shockingly off. Touches, movement, decisions from the all-time leading goal scorer of the French national team, and he didn't look the part. O'Brien was chasing shadows for majority, if not all of the first half in the midfield, and Bouanga did nothing. Was it the formation? Potentially, because in Game 3 versus Vancouver, they were much better in a 4-3-3 than a 3-4-3. And I think if you ask Steve Cherundolo now, he wishes he would have changed it quicker. But think about this. They were still winning 1-0. And easily they win that game, if not for the own goal from Chanot. There was no threat from Seattle, and yet here we are talking about LAFC letting it slip again. No Miami, Columbus, Cincy coming out of the East. They controlled home field advantage all the way to MLS Cup, and they dropped the ball. Or should I say, kicked it into their own net. But now this offseason becomes interesting. The Griezmann rumors, they become louder. The concerns over Giroud and his 2 goals in his first 16 appearances with LAFC become bigger. Is O'Brien worth the price tag? What's the back line look like? A lot of issues here and a lot of questions. 2019, it left scar tissue, but nobody, and I mean nobody, including myself, thought that scar tissue would still be there in 2024. And yet here it is, imprinted in solid rave green, that Seattle Sounders, in the biggest moments, have their number. Atlanta United were the Cinderella story of the 2024 MLS Cup Playoffs. I'm not sure I haven't seen a bigger MLS oxymoron in my 20-plus years of being involved in this league. How can they be the Cinderella of the ball? With that owner, fan base, stadium, and the amount of money that's poured into that roster. Yet I need you to follow me on this. They were. See, this summer they fired their coach, they sold their 2 best attacking players, and somehow got better. They had a 10% chance of making the playoffs on the final day. They did. They finished 34 points behind Inter Miami and Lionel Messi, and not only needed to beat them once, but twice. And they did. And for the second time in their history, Rob Valentino had to take over as interim head coach and get them to this point. Yet Sunday, that showed the MLS world what they really are. They didn't have a single shot on goal in their playoff game versus Orlando. And now they enter a postseason and a transfer window that is the most interesting story in all of MLS. Garth Lagerwey is their president, and he's been successful everywhere he's been, Real Salt Lake and Seattle. But during those times, he never got to hire his own coach. He inherited Jason Kreis and Brian Schmetzer. Now during this playoff run, he lets Patrick Vieira go to Genoa in Serie A because he needed to see Rob Valentino see this thing out. So now what? Does he stay with Rob Valentino in his understanding of what happens in-house? Does he go to a foreign coach with MLS experience like Ronnie Dyla? Or does he go to a foreign coach with no MLS experience? Or does he go try and convince Jim Curtin to come to Atlanta or even Tata Martino? See, make no mistake about it. With 2 designated player spots open and a confidence within this group that the old Atlanta United is on its way back, this may be, actually, check that. This is the most enticing job in MLS at the moment. And the biggest moment in Garth Lagerwey's career, because we finally get to see what he gets to do with a clean slate and what he wants to do. A new technical director and a new head coach will be there in Atlanta to begin next season. I cannot wait to watch this unfold in 2025. Inter Miami in its first full season under Tata Martino set a record for the most points in a regular season. That means they win their second trophy under Tata Martino. And yet after the biggest upset in MLS Cup playoff history, he is out in Miami. Now the report is for personal reasons, and I think there's some truth to that. But I also think there's a little proof in the pudding when you look somewhere else. Because if we're to believe that this was his decision, then how did they come so quickly to Javier Mascherano? So much so, I heard this rumor late September that this was in the works. Now, nobody should be surprised that it's a friend of Lionel Messi's, but that also doesn't mean you can't be skeptical of the appointment, because this is his first managerial job in the professional ranks. And Mascherano was indifferent with the Argentine Olympic and U20 teams, and now he's given a 3-year deal in Miami. How does he do? And yet I don't think that's the bigger story. It's actually in the press conference with owner Jorge Mas, who alluded to better players coming to Miami. Who leaves? Who comes? When do these deals happen? Who makes these decisions? It's never a dull moment in Miami. And when they kick off the Club World Cup in 2025 in South Florida, something tells me that the deepest roster we've ever seen in MLS history will look a lot different than the one that lost to Atlanta in the playoffs. Get your popcorn ready. This should be fun. And in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I figured I'd give you something to think about. And it comes from me and Tata Martino. One of my favorite things about my job for the last 15 years in media is meeting people from all over the world. And because of what I do for a living, many of people want to call me to tell me their story and to get my takes on things. Tata Martino, the famous Argentine coach from Barcelona and Argentina's national team, became manager of Atlanta United. And the first time I sat down with him, he was guarded and reluctant to share things. And yet through his translator, we somehow connected on a whole different level. So much so that the second time I meet him, he comes over to me with his translator and says, "Thank you." And I look around perplexed and say, "For what?" He watched a concussion video that I had done with MLSPA, and he wanted access to more information because he said it was the first time someone explained the injury and the issues around it in simple terms. He wanted to send it to Barcelona because he knew it would impact things. Proud moment for me because of my vocation in concussion and TBI in sports. But also, ever since we met, there was a bond, and one that I'm very grateful for. And it's a reminder to all of us to be open-minded to meeting people from all over the world who may not share the same language, but we share the same passion. So Tata, thank you. And I'll see you down the road, my friend. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and enjoy your family and friends, and then get ready for the MLS Conference Finals on Saturday night. We start in Florida with Orlando City playing in their first conference final against the New York Red Bulls, who are looking to make their second MLS Cup 16 years later after losing in 2008. That coverage begins at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by the big one, the 5-time MLS Cup champion LA Galaxy, in their high-powered attack welcome the best defense in all of MLS, the Seattle Sounders, who have been to 4 MLS Cups in the last 8 years. Both of these games and all its coverage right here on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV.